The No Nonsense Roundtable. It's a weekly show broadcast on Rochester, New York's 50,000-watt iHeart radio station, News Radio Wham 1180. The host, Dom Geneva, interviews guests from all walks of life, all with amazing stories to tell. What you are about to hear is a recording of a previous broadcast with limited commercials. Now, here's host, Dom Geneva.
Well, welcome everybody to the No Nonsense Roundtable. Saturday at 10 o'clock is the time, and it is on at any time on NoNonsenseRoundtable.com. Go there, look at one of the videos, and like it and share, and you'll make me happy, and you'll enjoy yourself. So today, if this show is about people you know that you want to know more about, and people you don't know you should know, my guest today is both. If you are in the music business, and even nationally, and if you are in the business locally, you know my guest, who is Bruce Pilato. Bruce, years ago, was my Gannett rep, and selling me advertising, one of the few guys I wouldn't throw out of the dealership because he's such a good guy. But there is another side of Bruce that I never knew about, and it is extraordinary. So the title of his company, or name of his company, is Pilato Entertainment Marketing and Media. And I'm going to turn this over to Bruce to tell you a little bit about himself. He's been in the business since before 1978, right?
76 was the first year I got stuff published with a byline.
Yeah, and let's just intrigue people quickly with this. And some of the publications that you and you've done, you do producing and a lot of other stuff. But let's impress people with the publications that you've been published in. And I have to, he's a humble guy. He doesn't want to talk about this stuff, so I'm going to have to drag this out of him. Go ahead.
Well, I thought I was going to work in radio, actually, because when I was a kid living in Irondequoit, New York, I had an illegal radio station in my basement. I got one of these home transmitters where you could transmit like your stereo to your bedroom upstairs. And I had a guy that Jimmy rigged it that allowed it to go like a mile. So I had like this radio station that I ran in my parents' basement for a couple of years. And then I went to Irondequoit High School, which was the first high school in the United States to have its own FM radio station. And I became the station manager, and I went to Buffalo to the federal building, and I took the FCC exam, and I got my FCC license, and I had to end my radio station because I knew that if I ever got arrested for broadcasting illegally, they'd take my license away.
Radio Free Irondequoit.
Yeah. Well, it was funny because, it also acted as the best form of drug prevention, because even though I grew up in the 60s and 70s when everybody was smoking pot and taking LSD and everything else, I didn't touch any of that stuff because I knew that if I ever got arrested, I would lose my FCC license. Because I always thought, that would be, my end goal was to be, like a Casey Kasem kind of thing. So, I did that, went to Syracuse. They had a great broadcasting communications school called Newhouse, which was part of the Newhouse family. When I got there, even though I had been on the radio for 2 years in high school, they said, well, you can file records. The upperclassmen have all the air shifts. And I said, well, that's crazy. I know more than these guys. So I walked across the street, and we had a daily newspaper called the Daily Orange. And there were 23,000 students at SU. It was the third largest private school in the country. So they put out a 5-day-a-week daily newspaper. And I said, you got anybody covering entertainment? And they said, well, not really. And I said, well, I would like to do that because I know a lot about that. I worked at House of Guitars as a kid. I was a music guy. So I started writing, and I started getting these interviews. The Police came to Syracuse when they were brand new, the group, the Police with Sting. And, I got to interview all these groups that were up and coming. And now those interviews, which I was smart enough to tape all of them, are worth a lot now with the book I'm writing and everything. So I got that. I got out. I said, okay, I'm going to be a big rock journalist. I'm going to go to New York City, and I'm going to work for Rolling Stone magazine. That was my goal. Of course, my father, who was a very smart guy and was an attorney and was on the board of directors of the Rochester War Memorial Arena, which became the Blue Cross Arena, said to me, and he had taken me to every show. I met Jimi Hendrix, I met Led Zeppelin, I met all these groups as a kid, right? When they came through Rochester. He said, why do you want to move to New York or LA? I said, well, Dad, that's where the music industry is. I have to be there. He goes, no, you don't. I said, no, I do. He goes, you know what the cost of living is in those cities? And I said, yeah, but he goes, all those shows we went to together, the Led Zeppelins and the Creams and this band and that band, he goes, you saw them all here? I said, yeah. He goes, do you ever notice that they always would play Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany before they would play Madison Square Garden? I said, yeah. He goes, that's because, that was their warm up. They wanted to, get it together before they played in a city where it really mattered. He says, if you stay here and you can somehow write for those publications from here, you'll own it. There's nobody else that does that. And it was like the best advice he gave me. And the other advice he gave me was, he said, don't try to be a paid employee of these magazines you want to write for, because then they own the interviews. I said, yeah. He goes, if you want to own everything, the photos and everything, you got to do it as a freelancer. I didn't even know what a freelancer was. I mean, I found out very quickly. So I took his advice. I mean, those two things were the best advice he ever gave me, because what I found out is not only did these bands open in the Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany area, but they would usually come here for 2 or 3 days and rehearse before they started the first show. So, Peter Gabriel would come to Rochester and get ready for his tour, and he'd be riding up and down the Erie Canal on a bike that he bought at Towner's bicycle shop. I mean, it's like I could, I remember taking somebody from Genesis to Don and Bob's because he had never had a white hot dog, and I had to, So, anyways, that is how I kind of built my reputation, and I started writing for these publications. In the meantime, there was a big company here called Gannett, as you know, and they were getting ready to launch USA Today. And I said, I'll get a job at Gannett as an entertainment writer. Well, there was no positions there. Jack Garner was the movie critic. Yeah. He had that gig. They said, well, you've got an advertising background from college. Why don't you work in our advertising department? You'll make more money than you would if you were writing, and you could freelance for us, which is what I did. And fortunately, I was able to work my way up to USA Today. And by the time the 80s rolled around, I was writing for USA Today and the Gannett Wire and all these other places. So it worked out really good.
No, good. No, and that's where I want to get, because you've had a national presence for this. And talk more about that. Now, some of the other publications.
Well, I wrote for Variety. I wrote for Hit Parader. I wrote for Rock Magazine. I wrote for the Gannett News Service, the Associated Press, all these people. And it was because I would say, hey, Fleetwood Mac's going to be rehearsing in Buffalo. I think I can get to Mick Fleetwood or Stevie Nicks. Would you be interested in a piece before the tour starts? And absolutely, so I would get to these people in upstate New York, and I would do a lot of phone interviews, and it just led to a burgeoning career. And then eventually I made the transition to other areas of the music industry.
Did you find when you were interviewing these people before they made it big that they had a different attitude or a different way of liking to be interviewed, or what? Did any of them get to the point where they would talk to you as up and comings, but once they made it, it was a different story?
I did a lot of those people like that, and I've remained friends with a lot of them that way. But they say write what you know. Okay, that's a saying that people say. Well, you got to interview what you know, too. I was very, very prepared when I did these interviews. Without a piece of paper in front of me, I just knew the stuff. Okay. And I would say, hey, I know you did an album with this group and it didn't work out. And then you went and formed your own group. Peter Frampton was in Humble Pie, and then he became massive. If you can talk about their history and you know their history and they know you've done your research, it's a much better interview.
Well, we're about ready to head into a break, but when we come back, I want you to touch base on your interview. Well, I guess it was one of your first interviews with Paul McCartney.
We'll do that.
This is Dom Genova from my friend Jack Greco at Jack Greco Furniture. I'd invite you to go see Jack Greco if you're looking to buy furniture right now. But beyond that, I'd invite you to go see Jack Greco if you're ever going to buy new furniture. And why? You can look and dream and plan how exactly you'd like your furniture. The type of wood, construction is half the fun. It's going to be reflective of your taste, and quite frankly, you'll want to pass it down as an heirloom. Can't say that about the big box stores. Go see Jack. This is Dom. I'd like you to listen to a jingle that the No Nonsense Roundtable produced for the Rotary Sunshine Camp.
It's a magical place for kids of all abilities.
At no charge, the Rochester Rotary Sunshine Camp has been serving children of all abilities for the last 100 years. Help us grow into the next 100 years. Go to sunshinecamp.org to learn more about how you can help.
Where kids have no barriers to fun.
The Rochester Rotary Sunshine Camp.
Well, welcome back. We're having a great conversation with Bruce Pilato, president, owner, Pilato Entertainment, Marketing and Media. With like I said, one of these fellas. I mean, you don't know the depth and the reach of the things that Bruce has done. And one of the things that this isn't the first time that I've interviewed Bruce, so I know some things about this. If you go to nononsenseroundtable.com, there is there's like a 6-minute talk that he gave about talking to Ringo Starr, excuse me, I have a little tongue-tied there, about his desire to buy a laptop. And I think that's got 70,000 views or something like that. It is hilarious. What's really great about Bruce is that he will tell a story and you have no idea where he's going with this thing. And at the end, you're delighted. It's like this little endorphin that you get from listening to stories. But one of the things that he was talking about in a previous interview was interviewing Paul McCartney and how you kind of got him to open up a little bit because you did do the research that you were just talking about.
Yeah, well, if you're going to be a music journalist, it's not so much anymore, but back when I started in the late 70s, early 80s, you know, if you could get to one of the Beatles, that kind of put you on the map. Mm-hmm. And if other artists saw, oh, well, he interviewed George Harrison or he interviewed that people, you know, it's just like that in business. I mean, if you do a deal with, you know, Exxon and you want to do a deal with another company and they say, oh, well, they did this deal with Exxon, we should work with them.
Well, frankly, that's what happens with my show is that getting good guests like you beget other good guests. Well, Bruce is on it. I can be on it too. So I totally subscribe to that.
So what ended up happening, the first Beatle interview I actually did was not Paul McCartney, it was George Harrison. And that was still probably in my top 3 of all greatest interviews I've done. And I've done 1,100 of them. What was interesting is that he didn't give many interviews. He didn't give many in the Beatles. And after John Lennon died, he didn't give any. Mm-hmm. And he came back with this album that he had really worked hard on. It was a comeback album. And it was called Cloud 9, and he had Elton John on it and Tom Petty and all these other people were on it. And, you know, he was willing to do like 5 interviews. And the reason I got the interview is because I had been writing for a recording magazine called Mix, where I would interview artists that had home studios and we would talk about, you know, what equipment they were using and how they, how they got the sounds they did. And, you know, Phil Collins got that amazing drum sound in the song In the Air Tonight, recorded in his bedroom. I mean, to this day, I still don't know how they did that. But anyways, George Harrison had been reading my stuff.
Really?
And when it came time to do the interview, he told the publicist at Warner Brothers, I want this guy that writes for Mix. His name is Bruce somebody. And that's Bruce Pilato. Yeah. So, you know, I wasn't going to do a phoner with him. I said, I'll fly to Los Angeles. So I flew to Los Angeles and I got an hour with him in a room in a closed door, just me and him. And it was phenomenal because I didn't ask him the typical, like, what was it like being in the Beatles? You know, first of all, we talked about the new album for the first like 20 minutes because I knew that was what he wanted to talk about. And then I graduated. And it was funny because he kept referring to, well, we did this song because I was thinking about when the Beatles did Day Trip, or I wanted the same guy. And he kept running Beatle references in his answers. And that just opened the door for me to ask Beatle questions, and it was great. Yeah. Well, after I did him, then I got Ringo. That was no problem because Ringo saw that I had done George, and he said, I'll do him. And I met Ringo. I eventually ended up working for Ringo, which is another story. And then I finally, I had to get to McCartney. So I was able to get an interview with Paul. First, it was as part of what they call the roundtable interviews, where they put like 4 journalists in a room, and then he would come in and he'd give us an hour, and we could use each other's questions and answers.
Okay.
So I did a couple of those with McCartney, and then I would get him a couple of times one-on-one, but I never got him for more than like about 15 minutes. What was interesting is when you put them all together, I got like an hour and a half with Paul McCartney. Yeah. So I've done that. But funny enough, the better interview was Linda McCartney.
Really?
Yeah, because I did a story. Everybody said, don't write about just, what it's like, his new album and this thing. I said, no, I got a different angle. It's the 20th anniversary of his marriage to Linda McCartney. And I think we should do a story on how hard or easy it's been for the most famous musician in the world to keep his marriage together for 20 years.
Yeah.
And I sold it to Us Magazine, which was huge because that was back when People and Us, everybody was getting those magazines. Yeah. And so I got to travel with McCartney. We went to 4 cities with him. And I never got him for more than a few minutes, but he would give me a few minutes. But Linda, I got for an hour and a half in a room. And I knew she would give me the dirt. I knew. I said, this is great. And what was interesting is I didn't want to ask Paul about the morning he got the phone call that John Lennon had been shot, but I knew Linda would tell me that story, and she did. And what was interesting is Paul had driven the kids to school. He came back, he walked in, and Linda was white as a ghost, and she said, I don't know how to tell you this, but John's dead. He's been shot. And it was just like, it was such a poignant interview. And I really felt like I was in the room when she told him that, the way she explained it to me. So the story dealt with her and him together, and it was great. And because Paul was nice to me because I didn't, slam his wife, which most people do. Linda was a wonderful person, and I think she changed his life. She made him a vegetarian, and that was, they had an amazing marriage. And to this day, he still talks about Linda and what an influence she was on him.
Well, and the thing amazes me about him, I saw him in Syracuse, I guess it was last year, the year before. It was 80 years old, and he's playing. I mean, he performed for, I guess, it was 2 hours straight. He didn't even take a break. I actually saw you there. I was all the way up top, in the nosebleed section. Actually, the last row, at the dome, and I saw you down there walking around. I yelled at you, but you ignored me.
I didn't ignore you. You know why?
No, I'm joking. We were 600 yards away.
You know why he always plays the Carrier Dome?
Why?
Right? This is like his 3rd time there. His current wife, Nancy, her family's from Skinny Atlas.
Oh, okay.
And I can't say you didn't hear this from me, but there's a very strong rumor out there that they have a home in Skinny Atlas. And what he does is, if you ever look at his tour schedule, there's always a few days off after he plays Syracuse. And that's because they go up to Skinny Atlas and hang out. But look, he's a normal guy. He puts on his pants one leg at a time. Yeah. And I've been lucky enough to be around him many, many times.
Yeah. Well, let's. We're about ready to. We have about 2 more minutes in this segment, so let's talk about, before we get into a little more in-depth questions. Let's. Why don't you drop some more names for me?
Well, I've had a lot of interesting interviews. I think the last time I was on the show, I told you probably the best interviews I ever did were Little Richard.
Little Richard, yeah. He
was just so animated and so wonderful. And
just give me the line on that one when the beauty has.
Yeah. So the first interview I did was for a European television thing, and I've done a lot of work in TV and radio and print. Obviously, I've had, I think, 1,600 articles published. But what he did is, I walked in there and we were filming, right? And he had a guy doing his makeup. And he comes out, he's got the pompadour, and he was dressed to the nines. He had the silk shirt and these incredible pants. He had the cowboy boots that were like something that came out of Nashville with all the glitter and everything on it. And he was just checking his eyeliner and everything. And I sat there and I waited for him to turn around. He's looking in the mirror and he turns around and I said, wow. I said, you look fantastic, Richard. This would be great on television. And he looked at me and he said, the beauty is on duty.
The beauty is on duty.
Yeah.
Oh, God, that's fantastic. Yeah. And with that, we have to sell some stuff and make some money. And we're going to inform people about the news. This is Dom for my friend John Myers and his new company, Life Interviews. I'm going to ask you to go look at the website he has, Life Interviews. There's no T in it, Interviews, where you'll see a fantastic presentation on what they do. And what they do is create a video legacy for you to pass down to future generations. More than just getting your DNA, you can pass down your story. Go see, you'll be amazed. It's a great idea, but do me a favor. Wait till the end of the No Nonsense Roundtable. Well, welcome back. We are having a conversation with Bruce Pilato, who I am proud to say is one of my friends. I've cooked for you. If I've cooked for you,
don't hold that against me.
If I've cooked for you, what did I make an Italian food? What did I make for you?
Of course, you made an Italian.
I make Italian food. You know,
I only hang around with you because you have such a lovely wife, and my wife loves to be with your wife.
Yes, the two of them, the two of them get along famously. And I hate to think of what they're saying to each other about us.
I know.
Yeah. But so Bruce, we were talking about his days as a journalist, and he's much more than that now. So, but you know, I have to drag him out because he doesn't want to brag, but I have to make him brag because other than that, we don't have a show. So go ahead.
Well, I mean, the transition came very quick. In the 80s, the compact disc came out, and they had to refashion all these releases into box sets of, you know, the best of Crosby, Stills, and Nash with 4 CDs and a booklet and all that kind of stuff. So I got hired to work on 50 of those things, and I'm still doing them, where I write the liner notes, I help pick out the tracks, I help clear stuff that they have to get from other labels. And that got me working directly with a lot of artists one-on-one. And one of the first ones I did was the group Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and they came to me. Greg Lake actually came to me and said, "Well, you know, I would like you to be my personal manager," and that I also worked within ELP as well. So that led to that, and I went on to manage several other artists, and that's really what I do now. I work with labels to some degree, and I still do little journalism. If I get offered, you know, a Keith Richards interview from the Rolling Stones, and I can write it for him. You know, I put the journalism hat on, but I don't do it anymore to make a living like I used to. It's really, I'm in artist management now.
Well, you spent some time overseas with this too, right?
Oh yeah, I've worked all over the world. But what's interesting is the business has really changed, and you know, when I got into it, it's funny because I used to tell my wife, I said, you know, if I had gotten into it right out of college, these rock stars would come up to me and say, okay, where's the Coke? Where are the hookers? Right? Now they come up to me and say, did you schedule my yoga class? And do we have a vegan option in tomorrow's meal? You know, I mean, they're all, you know, they've been through the drugs and everything. And I told my wife, I said, just once I wanted to throw a TV out of a hotel window, but that never happened. Anyways, so I've really looked at the way the business has changed. In one sense, you know, this is the best of times and it's also the worst of times. You would think it's bad to be in the music industry. The music industry is no longer the record industry. That's dead, gone, buried. Do people still make records? Absolutely. Are there still viable record companies? Yes. Is streaming still a huge way for people to make money? Yes, but not for artists. Because artists have to sell like, you know, 300% more in streams to equal what they would make from one, you know, record sale. So their attitude is, well, we've opened you up worldwide on streaming. It's everywhere. You know, your records, your music will be heard in Bangkok. It'll be heard here. It'll be heard there because everybody has Apple Music or Spotify or whatever. You know, the problem of it is, you know, it used to be the record was the center of the universe and everything was based around the new record and the tour and the press and the media. Now it's a live music industry. And that is why concert tickets are ridiculously priced now, to the point where they're really, you're going to see some changes. And there's been good things and bad things in the music industry. One of it is the ticket fees have just gotten out of control. I think you're going to see the Justice Department put the squeeze on people like Ticketmaster and some of those people. There's only 3 record companies of any stature anymore. There used to be a lot of them, but there's 3 majors. There's Warner Music, there's EMI, which owns Universal, and so there's Universal Music, or they own EMI, I should say. Universal, Sony, and Warner Music. Those are the three biggies. They still make a lot of money. And their purpose in life right now is to break artists worldwide, because they have offices everywhere and they can do it. But you've seen now a growth in the indie business, and it's really, if you can put on a guitar and you can sing a song, you can still make a living. And there are a lot of people out there that don't have big record careers, but they're selling out arenas. And that is because now technology has changed everything. And I'm not just talking about AI. AI in the music industry is really bull crap, because the bottom line is nobody thinks it's right to take John Lennon's voice and create new Beatles songs that he had nothing to do with. What they did on this last one is they isolated his voice from a cassette they had, and then they built the rest of it around it. That's legitimate. What's happening now is that artists now have direct contact with their fans. They have they can email them, they have websites, they have Twitter, they have TikTok, they have all this stuff going on, and they don't need the stuff they needed before. They don't need MTV because they have YouTube, and they can post the stuff on YouTube, and they can promote on YouTube. I don't take this the wrong way. They don't need radio stations anymore. I mean, very few people are buying records because they've been listening to the radio.
Correct.
They're buying records because somebody sent them a link, they checked it out, and I'm discovering all these incredible bands from all over the world, that I never would have heard on the radio. So I think it's a whole new business. And the artists that are the older artists, which still have a big audience, they have a lot of spendable income. Okay. The baby boomers are 60s, 70s years old. These are people who have $2 million in their retirement fund. They can get on a plane and go to Las Vegas and pay stupid money to see a show. So those guys that are willing to embrace the new technology and the way to reach consumers are the ones that are really doing well.
And one example of that is John Dretto, another local guy. I mean, I don't know how many million followers he has. He has the backings of all these other companies and stuff. I mean, and it's not something that I'm aware of. This is outside of my sphere of influence or recognition.
Well, I just signed a 21-year-old girl from Marcellus, New York, which is between Syracuse and Skaneateles.
Okay.
Singer-songwriter. She's 21. She writes her own stuff. She produced her own record. She just blew me away. I didn't know anything about her. Somebody who I barely knew called me up and said, you should check this girl out. And I said, I'm never going to sign any more artists because I'm already over my threshold for available time, but I had to sign this girl. She was that good. And I got her a record deal in 5 days.
Wow.
With one of the Warner Brothers labels.
Wow.
And she does a podcast every Tuesday night. And I just happened to watch it last Tuesday. And there were people from Spain watching her and talking to her. She would never be exposed over there if it wasn't for the new technology.
Well, the new technology, there's pluses and minuses. I talked to Felix Cavalieri. He's talking about auto-tune.
Yeah. Not a good thing. I mean, it's only a good thing if you're a horrible singer. But even then, it makes you sound like Darth Vader, with a high voice or something. I can tell auto-tune right away. What's more interesting is what's going to come in the future when you're going to get guys like, anybody out of thin air, Billy Joel. He can go in a room and he can sing the scale and he can do that. And there'll be new Billy Joel albums for the next 100 years because they can capture his voice and they can, through AI, they could create new songs where it's Billy Joel singing. That's his voice. I'm not really in favor of that. And there are, I'm very active, as you know, in the Grammy organization. I've been a voting member for 35 years. I'm part of the advocacy group, and we're going to Washington and we're trying to get things done. And one of the things we're trying to do is limit what they can do with AI in terms of manipulating an artist.
Well, eventually, there's the rumor that you're not going to have actual actresses and actors anymore. It's going to get that good.
Yeah.
So who knows? But we do know one thing. We are heading to a break, and we will see you. Well, not see you. You will hear us right after the break. This is Don for my friend Todd, who owns Martinizing Dry Cleaning in Fairport. like I like to say to you, he picks your clothes up and he drops your clothes off. Why schlep them yourself? I love the word schlep. You can save your time and your effort and your gas and do other things rather than take your clothes back and forth. They do a great job. Their number is 425-4242, 425-4242. Use them. I do all the time. Well, welcome back. We're in our last section of the show, and we're talking about Bruce Pilato, who is president, CEO, owner of Pilato Entertainment, marketing and media. Just a wonderful, it kind of rolls off your tongue. I like that. It's very good.
I like the LLC part at the end because everybody knows I'm a real corporation now.
Yeah. And there's so many things that you could charge off to your LLC if you're like me, but that's the way they wrote the tax laws. So this April was an anniversary, and it wasn't an anniversary of we're going someplace completely different, ladies and gentlemen. It was a anniversary of something that happened 2000 in 1912, right?
Yeah, 113 year
1912 that you are an expert on.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm very. I'll tell you the short version. I was 5 years old. It was 1962, or maybe I was 6 at the time because I was born in 56, and it was the 50th anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic. And I remember my mother reading a big magazine or newspaper article about it. And I said, "What's that?" And she was telling me about the ship and how these people died. And what was so sad is that it was the first time the ship had ever sailed. And it was supposed to be the unsinkable ship. And of course, it just proves that, if the big guy upstairs decides something's going to happen, there's nothing you can do about it. And all these people died. So I became fascinated as a kid, way before the movie, way before there was any interest in the Titanic. And it just became a hobby of mine. Then what happened, again, bringing my father into the picture, he was an attorney for the veterans of foreign wars. He was a big attorney with veterans-related causes. And there was a guy that had been in the VFW who lived in Rochester, who was the son of one of 4 Rochesterians that died on the Titanic. Okay, and what basically happened is his father was working for Gleason Pumps, or one of these big industrial companies based here. And they had gone over to England, and he had sold this company the most expensive pump they make. And, it was a big sale. He far outdid his quota. And so the company, wanting to reward him for the good job he had done, said, we've changed your trip home. You're going to take this ship called the Titanic. It's the first time it sailed, luxury liner. They put him in second class, and he came over, and he died on the ship. And his body was later recovered. They recovered about 400 bodies of the 1,500 that drowned. And I don't know all the specific details, but basically there was a fight between his wife and this guy's sister, who were both trying to claim the body to get the insurance money. And so the body was should have been the wife because they were married. The sister got there in Newfoundland or wherever the bodies were brought to. And it was coming back on a train, and the Royal Canadian Mounties stopped the train and got the body back and all this stuff. And there were all these articles in the Rochester Herald, which was prior to the Rochester Democrat Chronicle. So anyways, to make a long story short, my dad was doing this guy's will. He was terminally ill. His wife had died. He had no kids. He had no heirs. And he had all this Titanic memorabilia. The newspaper, the Titanic sinks, and all this stuff. And he was just going to give it to the Rochester Public Library. And my father said, "What are you going to do with all this stuff?" He goes, "I'd like it to go to somebody, who would appreciate it. I was just going to give it to the library." And my dad said, "My son," and at the time I was, 8th grade or something. He said, "My son has always been a Titanic historian, really into it." He goes, "If you give it to me, it'll go to a good home." So I ended up with all this stuff, this incredible memorabilia. And then I went on and got other things. I was involved with the Titanic Historical Society, and they would get these survivors to come in to these conventions they had. They stopped doing them because they're all dead now. But I actually have the inquiry book, which is like the Warren Commission for Kennedy. Well, they did one for the Titanic that came out in 1912, and I have it signed by 26 of the survivors.
Wow.
So anyways, and then of course the movie came out and everything blew up. And but it was really interesting because there's a great documentary that was just on the National Geographic. They went down and scanned the whole boat with cameras, and they did a 3D recreation of the ship now, so they could get into the rooms that they couldn't before. And it's just fascinating because what they found is that the whole collision with the iceberg took 6 seconds. Okay, and it just flooded one too many compartments.
Right.
And had it not flooded the 6th compartment, it would have stayed afloat. And so it was really, really interesting. And the other thing is they tried to avoid the iceberg. If they had just hit it dead on, it wouldn't have sunk either. So, you're just hearing all these things and how it worked. And there were all these incredible people like J.P. Morgan had a ticket to come home on the Titanic and change his plans at the last minute. I mean, what would happen if J.P. Morgan never lived? If he had died, would we still have the financial world that we have today? Who knows? So I just thought one incident in history changed so much.
So this compels the question that I have for you. But you are a collector of a lot of different things. I mean, your collection of music memorabilia is amazing. I've been to your basement. Now, what is the one thing that you have that is most valuable to you? Not financially, mentally.
Oh man, that's a hard question. I have a lot of things that are very rare and special to me, but not necessarily financially. They mean a lot to me personally.
Don't talk about your wedding license or something. No, this is something retail. What do you have, or what experience do you look back at and you go, wow, that I'm glad about that.
I'm very.
And don't talk about the birth of your children.
No, I'm very lucky because a lot of the stuff that I've done, especially in the entertainment industry, has been recognized by those celebrities who have taken the time to write me a personal letter. I mean, I have a personal letter from one of the Rolling Stones that was written to me, and I have, that kind of stuff. But, what I've been trying to do is work things out with where I live in the town of Webster to try to put together a nonprofit arts resource center, which would have not only the collectibles are great, and yes, they're worth money, and a lot of them are great. They're all insured, and they're all in a very secure place. But what's more important is what I've collected over the last 50 years, like every issue of Rolling Stone. And I have 27 file cabinets filled in an 1,800 square foot room of press kits for films and music. Yeah. I did a lot with film as well. So, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I have a legacy, and it's called an archive. And someday, I want it to be shared with people. I don't want it, to be sold in an auction for pennies on the dollar.
Well, you sound like the guy with the Titanic memorabilia. You wanted to go someplace where it's going to be appreciated after you're gone.
Yeah, well, I have 3 kids, and we're forming a foundation, and they'll be the executors of it. And I just told them, I said, if it's going to come down to that, I'd rather go to Syracuse University or someplace like their U of R where I teach now, or Nazareth or something like that. There'll be enough money in our estate where they won't need to sell my collection, to enjoy life. Yeah.
Well, Yogi Berra, God rest his soul, his museum is at Montclair State University. So it sort of sounds like that. You could get one of these universities to host it for you.
Well, the University of Minnesota has all of Bob Dylan's handwritten lyrics and stuff like that. Just
why Minnesota?
He was born there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he grew up there.
And he wasn't Bob. It was
Robert Zimmerman.
Robert Zimmerman, yes,
right.
Robert Zimmerman. And we've been talking to Bruce Pilato, and we are out of time, Bruce.
Well, it's always a pleasant experience when I come here.
Well, I do appreciate that, and I'll cook some food for you, bring it up to you, and you can show me that Titanic stuff.
Yeah, I got a lot of it.
Okay. Well, until next week, boys and girls, the No Nonsense Roundtable, 10 o'clock, right here.
Thanks for listening. Tune in every Saturday from 10 to 11 on News Radio Wham 1180. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll make more.